Tonight we want to talk about the parents of Saint Therese, really to show the family life from which this great saint came. For many Catholics, we all know Saint Therese. Actually, a lot of us think we know her, and we're discovering new things all the time. Just very, very recently, they published her plays, the plays that she'd written, and the poems that she'd written. They're just out, the new critical edition is out, so we expect the translation about a year or two. And just within the last month, there's this book, The Passion of Therese of Lisieux. Like, it sounds like, the love life of Caroline of Monaco, or Sarah of York, or something like that. They're really the suffering. The translation of a very well-known French book. But it's just off the press right away. The study of the suffering of Therese. She had tuberculosis and gangrene of the stomach, of the intestines. And but the darkness she went through, and the struggle, and the temptations, against faith. Was there a God? Was there a heaven? But also the terrible agony and the emotional suffering she went through. It's a very, very powerful and a frightening book. Very, very strong. It was just translated recently. Father Guy Gaucher is one of the Carmelites like myself. He was made a bishop recently at one of the suburbs of Paris. Very conservative, and the priest didn't like him, and within 6 months the poor man had a nervous breakdown. That's what happens to bishops these days. And so now he's an auxiliary bishop of Lisieux, and probably very, very happy there, but he continued writing. Then there's this, if you look at it, this other book that came out just last month, Experiencing Saint Therese Today. And it's really a study of her relation to America. I have a little article in it on an American artist, American photographer, Anne Therese. But things like her plays, a feminist view of Saint Therese, a psychoanalyst looks at Therese and the modern temperament, a challenge for doctrine, a forerunner of that. There's still this tremendous interest in the study of this woman. Because she is in a sense, the great forerunner of the modern church. And Barry Ullenhoff, a very well-known writer, has a section here that says, she in her little and large way, her simple and complex way, in the art of the spiritual life is what James Joyce is to the novel, what Stravinsky and Schoenberg are to music, what Eliot is to poetry and criticism, what Pablo Picasso and Matisse are to painting, what Ibsen and Strindberg and Chekhov are to drama. That's pretty heavy company. And it's a very wonderful article he has here, and Barry Ullenhoff, on Saint Therese. But I say, here are just two books, just right off the press. Dealing with her, and there's more, there's still more. It looks like they'll never exhaust just what's in this particular woman. This was only 24 when she died. And when she was dying in her little room, photographs, a picture she had of Saint Cecilia, because she was a young girl, Saint Joan of Arc, who was a young girl, Théophane Reynard was a young man, just turned 20, early 20s, another patient in early 20s. There were young people who were her favorites, and only Saint Cecilia was canonized. The others weren't at that time. So here's this young woman, and as I say, she's very, very well known in the Catholic Church, one of the most popular favorites of the modern saints. So what I want to do today is to share some thoughts with you about the family life that she came from. Because some people think of her father kind of a dreamer, just off there praying, climbing mountains, traveling, and outward kind of thing. And her mother died when she was only 4. there wasn't much influence there. And, you know, she came out of this beautiful family, a very nice family, you know, no problems. This little girl kind of grew up, at 15 became a nun and died at 24, and look, you know, it's not that way at all, you know. That family had many, many problems. You see that many of you are going through or have gone through. The problems the family had seem to be terribly, terribly hard, terribly uptake. They lived at the end of the last century, you know, the parents, and his name was Louis Martin. Her name before she was married was Zelie. That's the French like put it in Zelia, and it's not. Geoghegan was her name. It's interesting, and it kind of fits in ways with much of many people, like in the States and in this area. They were both from military families. This is now Therese's parents. They were both from military brats. Do you have military brats here? I mean, we all know them anyway, you know. Louis' grandfather was with Napoleon in Moscow. Do you remember when Moscow, you know, a lot of war and peace, and you've seen it on the movies, not the big opera that was on recently, when the French invaded Russia, so the Russians just burned Moscow, and the French army starved and had to come back. Well, he was there in that French army with Napoleon, and his son, who was 12 and a half, was with him. Sometimes brought the family into wars with him, you know, his son. And later the son and the father were captured, and the boy 12 died in the Christian war. So, but the father was freed anyway. So, like in Louis' family, his grandfather was a prisoner of war, fought in a war in lost. His uncle had been killed and died in prison. And they had that kind of a sense of, like a misspeak, you know, about the glories of France. You know, France now wasn't strong, it had been conquered by the Prussians, by the Germans, but they kind of looked back to the glory days, the great days of French militarism. They also had, like the Zelie's family was the same too. Her father was a military man in various different campaigns in Europe. Now when some of the wars were over, he retired, I suppose after his 20 years, he got a good pension, and he came back up to northern France to live there. Louis' father was in one of the wars down in Spain. While he was away, Louis was born, a young boy born in Strasbourg, or born in Bordeaux. But not only is he got this great military background, you know, in the sense of the glories of France, you know, when people lose war, they often lose war for war. But they also were from strong Catholic families. They were from the north of France, Normandy, where William the Conqueror, you know, from that area where he's from. And some of the family had suffered in the French Revolution. Like there's one marvelous story of I think it's of Zelie's, like a grand uncle, who was a priest, and he was going along with the Blessed Sacrament when they taken to someone who was sick, and some of the Jacobins, that was Robespierre's crowd, you know, they were very, very anti-church, very anti-clerical, and they saw him, and the three of them went over to pick him, and he took the Blessed Sacrament out, put it on a stone, and said, Jesus, you take care of yourself. I take care of myself. And he fought and threw one of them into the river, the other two ran off. So, but you see, these are the kind of traditions in the family. The glory of Napoleon and the French army, and that strong faith like that had been tested. It was interesting when Zelie's father retired from the army and came back to the school. he kind of settled down, and his wife started a cafe, to try and make some money. When people retire from the army, they might start some other job. But that's what she started. It was a cafe, but unfortunately, she was a terrible talker. And when people would come into the cafe, she started giving sermons. Well, like men in the morning going in for breakfast or for lunch, the last thing in the world they wanted was a sermon from this woman of strong faith and very strong nationalism. And they just got fed up and they just stopped going. So there was kind of a family where they didn't have much money then. He was struggling along. He started a cabinet maker, but from starting new and then. So they kind of struggled anyway. Again, as most people have to, especially when they're young families, struggling along. Sometimes not having work, sometimes being able to get the work, starting the store, fading. But anyway, it came up. What's interesting too is that Zelie, it was Therese's mother, she didn't get on with her mother. Does that sound familiar too? And she had a sister and a brother. And later on she writes to her brother and says, "Mother spoiled you. You were the only boy. She spoiled you, but she was very hard on you." And whether you're experiencing that, or it may well have been that she spoiled Isidore, who was her brother, but was very, very hard on Zelie. Louis, remember he was born in Bordeaux. His father was now fighting in the army down in Spain. And then he came back, and then they moved to Strasbourg. And in Strasbourg, there's a very famous clock, a big clock in the center of the city. When the thing rings, all kinds of neat machines work, and guys come out and start hammering with the gong and so on. And it's one of the great masterpieces of European craftsmanship. But he was fascinated by that. He said, "I'm going to become a watchmaker." And he did. He started studying to be a watchmaker. And he was a man who loved nature. A man who loved reading. But he loved nature. And also a man of extraordinary Christianity. Everybody remembers that, we've had it before. And he loved to climb mountains. And one time he climbed a mountain, the great St. Bernard, where the dogs are, the real sad, sad dogs. You know where they're sad? Because they can't get to the ground. Yeah. But I know he went up there, and then he decided to become a priest there. Now, that might sound not wonderful to live up in the Alps, taking care of the travelers, the skiers who get lost and all of that. But the average climate there is 20 degrees below sea level. They have been really tough, terribly, terribly hard life up there. After about 5 years, most people have to come down. They get so ill. So when he went up, so the priest there said, "But you don't know any Latin. You have to know Latin in those days." And he said, "Go back and learn Latin." Now Louis, as a watchmaker, was very, very meticulous, very careful. And he kept a very exact book. And he went to the priest, and went to class, $1, bought a book, $2, all of this. And then one day it just said, "Sold my Latin book. He sold my text." He just either got fed up, or couldn't handle the language of Latin, or he just gave up on it. So he continued with his studies of watchmaking. He spent 5 years as an apprentice. So when people sometimes think of it as kind of a dreamer, and that Therese's family are wealthy, it was easy for her, and we call it bourgeois family. Her father had done 5 years of apprenticeship in a job that was tremendous application. He was a superb craftsman. In fact, he was so good at the watchmaking, he would make the watches, that then he branched out into jewelry. And again, this is showing you don't have to be in very, very spiritual activities to become a holy person. Because what can you imagine is more worldly than real than making jewellery and watches, fancy watches. Maybe it's a lace making, which is what his wife was. But anyway, he was a very, very hard working, very successful businessman. He did very, very, very well. And when he gave up the idea of being a priest, he started reading, he learned to read. And that was a time in France. See, France had been defeated by the Germans. There's kind of depression. So they started studying the great French cathedrals and great literature. There was a whole idea, a whole new time of literature and romantic literature and the greatness of France. And Joan of Arc was remembered, and all of this, And he got caught up in that. There was a time for folk dancing. He joined a folk dancing club and, folk singing. And he joined all kinds of clubs. He was a beautiful singer, especially of folk songs all the time. And he bought, money bought the property, the cabin on it, the cabin of the lake. And there, the life was actually no intention in the world of getting married. But his mother did. His mother wanted to get married. And his mother attended a lace making class. See? And there was a young girl in the class who was also learning lace making. So of course, the matchmaker began to maneuver to try to get this young girl to meet her son. Now, how this young girl, Zelie, was in the lace making class was, when she was finished school, she was very good student. I think 10 times out of 11, she won the award for literature. But she was also good as Laurie Snyder. But she was like a national merit student, and just doing fabulously well. She decided, she thought the God was calling her to be a nun. She went along and asked to enter, and the woman said, no. We don't know why. I think maybe because her health wasn't good, whatever, she said no. So Zelie said, well, if I can't be a nun, I better get a job. And after she graduated, I better get a job. So I better get a lace maker. And so she went to school to learn how to make lace. And the place they lived in was a place called Alençon. It was like a small a country town where you'd have the big fairs, probably something like Stanwood kind of city, maybe a little bit bigger. And she went to school and learned lace making and became very, very good at it. Really very, very good. And of course, this other lady there saw this charming young girl, she's in her early 20s, and introduced her to this charming son. And the next thing, going very well, they were married. It's right there. So that was the beginning then of this the family of Saint Therese when they met. Now she had become so good at lace making that she began a little home industry. And what she would do is, she had her own house there, and she used the basement as a shop. And people would come in, women would come in, say from the town, or maybe the outskirts of the country, and she would draw a pattern for them and give them the thread. And then they'd go home, and then next Thursday they'd bring back the piece they had made, and she'd repair them, or then she would sew them all together and make the pieces. And Alençon is very famous for its lace. So she began to do really, really well and to build up this terrific business. And in fact, she did so well. Here she was, now she's married and has children eventually. She did so well as manager of her own business that her husband sold his watchmaking and jewelry business and became the manager, but especially the salesperson, salesman. You know. And so he would then, he would travel around a lot, trying to get orders for them. He also, as a watchmaker and jeweler, he was also very good at drawing. And he would draw designs for the lace. It's very interesting to read some of the newer books on Therese and on the family that are now written by women, Monica Furlong and Patricia O'Connor, because now they're looking at the situation from her point of view. I'd say from a woman's point of view, but the older books, Piats, written by men looking at it, see how wonderful is it. But Patricia O'Connor is looking inside, look, heavens, here's this woman, okay? She has a large family, with all the problems of family. She has a business of her own. Here's a working mother. What's the husband doing? He's going off selling stuff, going off climbing the mountains, going off fishing. It's very interesting to see the feminist approach now to it. And Patricia O'Connor is very hard on him. He's trying to be irresponsible and neglectful. But I don't think that was it. He certainly was much kind of more scattered than she was. And much more contemplative, much more kind of prayerful. A man that would love to say, looking at the mountains or reading a poem or a novel, where she prefers to cook dinner, to get the business, and almost, you wouldn't call her workaholic, but an element of that in her. She was a doer. He was kind of prefer to sit back and contemplate and pray. So that I was there. So he loved to travel. I don't know if she loved her or not, but she was stuck with the kids at home. She would go to Paris and all over France. He just loved that. And then he got to go on a pilgrimage. He went to Rome and went to Athens and Constantinople and they sent back the cards, And it's very interesting that when a number of his children were born, he wasn't there. Even when St. Therese was born, the father wasn't there. He was off. But again, he was off getting jobs, getting work, for the business. So I said they were hard-working people who built up, very decent living. I said she was very active, and there's some very moving letters from Paris, where he was, say on business to her, saying, let's just work normally. Let's build up this enough. Don't be destroying your health. We don't need all of this money. Take it easy. Our love for each other and the kids is far more important. He's terribly worried about her. He's overworking. And I said there are a number of letters where he's at her constantly, but she didn't pay too much attention to him. She seemed to read a minute. She seemed to be a fantastic organizer. And one lovely thing, she wanted to go to a prayer room, and then when they found that she could bring the baby to the room, so she was delighted when she could go. And I said, well, I have the baby now. Baby. Don't take one, I can't go. She said, no, bring the baby along. And it's very interesting, the structure in their prayer meeting. I mean, she went to Mass every day. Now, it wasn't hard. And they prayed together. So like an atmosphere of prayer in the house, and kind of like a structure to their devotions. And yet they weren't just living, say, in a vacuum. They was, taking care of the kids, taking care of the workers. They also had a great sense of responsibility to the people who worked on it. And where one worker died, they took in her little family for a whole year to care of. And Louis insisted that the workers be paid when they brought stuff back. That he wouldn't say, no, we waited other times. He said, no, that's our first responsibility. And whenever they were sick, they were tremendously careful. They'd bring food and they'd help, money and everything. They had that real sense of caring. which I think is wonderful to remember, that family, you see, they could have been so so wrapped up in themselves, but they really a shared family. And then one thing too, like on Sunday, was the day when all the farmers would come into Aaron's song. You see, and the father would know that's the Lord's. He did not open his shop on Sunday. And that was a tremendous sacrifice. But anyway, they did, I say, very, very well, and they had altogether 9 children. Four died. If we look like at the family situation there, Louis' mother died, and Zelie decided, well, we can't leave a poor man on his own. Here she was with her own large family, she took him in and took care of him. And then when he died, she had a real heartbreaking letter on that. But anyway, I say she took him in. The 2 oldest girls, they did something that we don't think of here in the States. They sent them to a high school, you know. And it's quite common in Europe, like it is in England still. You know, you send kids away, especially if you live in the country. You know, the high schools in the country, usually in the cities. So the 2 girls, anyway, were sent away. But Zelie, we have hundreds of letters that she wrote. You know, here's this woman that hasn't a minute, and yet sets aside time for prayer, and over hundreds of her letters, and big long letters, usually describing the activities of the kids, what the kids are up to. But say they were what do you call it, a happily married family, even though they had their problems, and we see some of those that are very, very close to us today. Here's the letters. They are filled with descriptions of the antics of the children. For example, Pauline was saying to Marie, my godfather is better looking than your godfather, because my godfather has hair, yours is bald. So she's full of, listening to what the kids are up to. Just say what she says about Therese, the little saint, became a great saint. She gurgles and babbles from morning to evening. She sings us little songs, but it is necessary to be accustomed to her to understand her. She says her prayers like an angel. Her letters are full of daily happenings, and you have a sense that she's a happily married mother. Then the letters also contain references to the illnesses of her children, the ordinary sicknesses, and her worry for them. What's also, I think, very interesting, and you can see how Therese picks this up in the flower, St. Teresa picks this up from the mother, is a tremendous objectivity. It comes from a tremendous respect for truth. And like her judgment on Therese, who's about 2 years old, is born out later. She says about her, Therese was the brightest, this woman. She and Zelie and her older sister, but most willful. Therese was the stubbornness to be, right at the end. Most, but I think she will turn out well. And the mother writes elsewhere, she said, she wouldn't tell a lie for anything, but she can be so stubborn and little worried. Because if she goes the wrong way, she will go very bad. If she goes the right way, she'll be very good. But I think she has the right instincts, especially for love for truth. This is when she was a tiny kid. But she says she's good-willed and doesn't want to hurt anybody. Celine is far more cheerful, far more obedient, far kinder. That's interesting about St. Therese, that the mother can say she's not as kind as her sister, and she's not as cheerful as her sister. You know, she's, in many of the judgments, the letters are full of this stuff. She's so sharp, you know, kind of not blinded. There's one of the letters that brings out a very interesting thing that again makes that family very real for us. Remember, I mentioned that they were from a military family, you know, and it was the glory. And you still find this in military people, you know. like you say about America and that today. And in 1870, the Prussians, these were the ones who later organized German unity, invaded France, and they just swept them. And France was conquered, and they were humiliated. 9 German soldiers were billeted in Zelie's home. St. Therese, she wasn't born yet, but in Zelie and Louis' home. And the mother writes, she said, they've disturbed the whole town, we've been conquered, we have to feed them, everybody's so upset at them. I said, it's terrible. So here were these very proud French people, and had to be feeding the English German soldiers who were there. But a very interesting thing happened. Louis caught one of them stealing some of the jewelry. And he got him by the neck. Here was, and you know what some of the Prussian soldiers can be like. He caught him by the neck and threw him out of the house, and straight down, and he fought him. And they said that it made him fierce. Something got him going, you know. But the next day he heard that there was a German order to shoot anyone who was looting, and that a German soldier had been shot by the commander for looting. And he went down immediately and withdrew the complaint to save the life of that German soldier. You know, but that's the kind of thing that makes people saints. Here's this man who's fierce tempered, saw this guy stealing in his own house, threw him out, reported it, but then found it, shot for that, and withdrew to try and save. You know, there's kind of a bigness, there's a bigness to them that you wouldn't think of when you think some of the ideas we have of them. Okay, now we all come from families, and we know that all families have their sufferings and difficulties. And this is very interesting to look at this family, to see the kind of problems that they had. 4 of their children died of babies. One was 4 and a half, which died. One little boy died in China. Now, what's behind that story, it wasn't the parents, is that Zelie, is the mother, had breast cancer. When she was a young girl in her teens, she was just running around the table. She slipped and banged her breast against the corner of the table. And later this developed, into lumps and into cancer. Later, when about her 3rd child was born, so she couldn't nurse the baby. So after that, the other children then, she had to what they call a wet nurse. A woman who just had a baby of her own and could breastfeed her baby. And then she would breastfeed the other baby too. And so Zelie would pay the woman then, to help feed her little baby. They didn't have the milk formula. So this woman took the money and said she'd feed the baby, but she didn't feed it. And the baby died from nothing then, from starvation. So Zelie then had a terrible fear after that, say, of the children. But she did find one wonderful woman, Rose, that took care of a few of the other babies, including St. Therese. But she's such a fear, because of that. So, like that very problem, that's kind of very frightening these days. They experience that. The 2 little boys died. And then the girl died about a year. They were in their first year when they died. And then Elaine died 5.5 years old. Louis' father died in 5 years. Within a period of 5 years, she went to the grave 6 times. With, I think, her own mother was, her husband's father, and 4 of her own children. So, you know, like I said, the holiness, they're really truly holy people. It wasn't just that they said the roses and, you know, they're nice and sweet and all that. Maybe they were very hard-working people, struggling to live, and with their children dying, their father, their mother dying. It was kind of hard. She says a lovely thing about taking them when the babies died. Say, 3 of them in their first year. She says of the deaths of her children, when I closed the eyes of my children and prepared them for burial, I was indeed grief-stricken. But thanks to God's grace, I have been resigned to his will. I do not regret the pains and sacrifices I underwent for them. And she goes on to say that she doesn't understand people who say, it would have been better not to have gone through all of that. She adds, they're enjoying heaven now. Moreover, I have not lost them always. Life is short. Soon I shall find my little ones again in heaven. And that tremendous sense of faith. Later on, St. Therese, this great, great, great saint, really has taught us how to pray and live a Christian life again. She went through a terrible time of worrying, you know, that God didn't love her. In fact, the time that God hated her, that she's damned. And she realized, I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters in heaven. And they love me. So heaven is where I am loved. And with the little ones, these brothers who died, kind of brought her to a sense that God is a God of love. And that heaven is where we are loved. And when Therese herself was dying, she had little pictures of the kids in the room to help her, you know, to pray for her again, that she'd be going to join them. It's a wonderful thing, you know, for some of you, I don't know, who have lost children, you know, that sense of Therese had, that she had like her own family saints, you know, in heaven, praying for her, taking care of her. Another problem that Leonie and Louis had, and I'm sure some of you recognize this too, is the problem of teenage daughter. Leonie. It's kind of hard. The other girls were kind of bright. She was very slow. And that's unshackled. But she was kind of slow and awkward. Now, there seemed to be something lacking in Leonie. Though she later became a nun, and a very sound. Ida Gores, in a very powerful book called The Hidden Face. Ida Gores is either a psychologist or psychoanalyst. It was a terrific study of Therese and all of this. And she says, well, this family were so proud of, you know, Jansenism and the French piety of that time. And here Leonie was the only one that broke through that. She was a very kind, charitable one, you know, who was very simple in her faith. And so she kind of broke through that, and they couldn't understand that because she wasn't a sweet, gentle, pious girl. And they didn't understand